Hello, everyone. So glad you're here. My name is Roz Cruz. If I haven't met you, I am an artist and educator and work here at the Williams College Museum of Art as the Associate Curator of Programs. And I also co-curated Pallavi Sen Color Theory with my colleague Nicholas Liou, who is here with us tonight, in addition to Pallavi. So basically, the three of us are going to have a conversation for about 35 minutes, and the intent of it is to help put the exhibition situated within the history of art. In particular, we'll discuss the role of sites and family represented within the show, iconography, and creative collaboration. We'll speak together, and then we're going to have time for audience questions. So please hold your questions till the end. We have ample time, though, so I'm hoping that you're writing them down, thinking about them, and bringing them to us. Lisa Doran is going to bring you a microphone when it's time, and you'll get to ask questions into the mic so everyone can hear you, and so it's recorded for the video. I really need to say some thank yous before we start. So very much thank you to Pallavi and Nick, and also all of my colleagues at WICMA, who contributed to making this exhibition possible. To have artwork in the galleries, to have people in the space, to have educational opportunities within a well-lit museum takes a lot of people. And I think it's always important to make sure people realize that it's not just about a single artist or a curator or that curatorial team. It's got all kinds of people involved. And I'm also just grateful for the generosity and vulnerability that Pallavi's show has brought to our museum. And it's been enlightening for me to see students interacting with the show and being inspired by it, and also, you know, all of the rest of our community members having that same kind of interaction. I have to say, I've actually seen someone walk into the gallery with a frown and then walk out with a warm smile. And I think that's one tiny example of the way art can be a transformative experience. And so if you haven't gotten a chance to go upstairs and see the exhibition yet, you have until December 22nd, and tomorrow, Nick and I are giving a curatorial walkthrough, so please come back 11 to 12 tomorrow if you're interested in that. Will be in the gallery. And then we also have something very exciting to share, which is we made a book here, and it's really a beautiful story of Pallavi's art and her practice. And there's 3 essays. It's just gorgeous. So it's for sale upstairs, $35, and it's an edition of 200. So get it while we've got it. Okay, that is mostly what I wanted to say. I'm now going to introduce my colleagues. Pallavi Sen, who was born in New Delhi in 1989, spent her childhood between Delhi and Bombay in India. An alumna of St. Xavier's College in Bombay, she received an MFA in Sculpture and Extended Media from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, and a BFA from the Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio. Sen has participated in various prestigious artist residencies, including MacDowell, the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, PICA's Creative Exchange Lab, Haystack Mountain School of Crafts, Shandaken Projects, Mildred's Lane, Oxbow, ACRE, and the Yale Norfolk School of Art. I know some of you in the audience actually met her at some of those residencies, which was very exciting. Currently, she is the Assistant Professor of Multiples and Distributed Art at Williams College and is the Dean at Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in Madison, Maine. Nicholas Liou. Nick studies Trans-Pacific and Asian diasporic art with particular interests in histories of material movement, 19th and 20th century landscapes, more than human ecologies, and indigeneity across the Pacific. He is a first-year PhD student and a 2024-2025 graduate fellow at the Yale Center of the Study of Race, Indigeneity, and Transnational Movement. Nicholas received his BA in art history with a minor in Asian languages and cultures from Northwestern University and an MA in the history of art, from Williams, graduated this last May. And he completed his thesis here about the botanical illustrations of John Tiley and breadfruit. While at Williams, he also worked here as a Mellon Curatorial Fellow at WICMA. So let's give everyone a big round of applause. And with that, we're transitioning over here. Would either of you like a glass of water? I would like. Well, this is mine. Here. We're very tender here at the Williams College Museum and appreciate care in its many forms. And I think water is a big part of that. Okay.
Should I start?
Yeah.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. I just first want to say that it's a great pleasure to have worked on this show with Pallavi and Roz and so many others. And even though I've been away for a few months now, it means a lot to come back and to see the exhibition and to be in conversation. And I guess I wanted to start this conversation by thinking also about how visitors enter the space for the first time too. And I know from our early conversations, sort of thinking conceptually about the space even before we knew sort of what might go into it, that you didn't want any labels on the individual works. And so I had a question about sort of interpretation. And speaking about the sort of first entry or entrance into the gallery, there's a really incredible diagram that will appear on the slideshow at some point on the sort of first introductory wall with the introductory text, which has some really evocative and beautiful descriptions of the work and also the people who are related to it. And so I wanted to ask how you sort of arrived at that piece as a sort of interpretive text, if you think of it as one, if it sort of how you think it orients the space for people.
Well, thank you all for coming. It's so nice to see all of you. I decided to not have any text. Well, I never even thought about text because I think the way that I was approaching the layout of the show and the space was very much like how you would arrange your own home. I'm very interested in the homes of my friends, my sister and brother-in-law who are also here. Some of my work lives in their home. I love going to my friends' houses and then seeing or noticing that, this is how something happened to be in their home, or they found it, maybe they went to school with somebody at the same time, or they went to a residency with somebody, or they were dating somebody and that's how they found such and such painting. And so I love how works are within homes. I'm also very interested in artists' houses and houses that people make over a long period of time and the alterations they do. And I like how artwork is placed within that sort of setup where it rarely has a 60-inch midpoint to it, because that is, that's for the whoever the average viewer is, and it's much more engaged with the furniture or the layout. And sometimes my mother, when she looks at something I've made or looks at anything, her immediate thought is often whether it would look good in her home. And I used to find that very irritating when I was in art school, but I think that is a totally, absolutely perfect first thought, is that how you want to spend time with it. And so that's what I was hoping would happen with the space too, that it would look like this completely unaffordable loft, and how you could place things within it. Of course, I think, labels are helpful and useful, especially if you're looking at things that are beyond your time or from a very different place. But I'm alive now and I'm living now. Most of the people who are looking at it are looking at similar objects, or they have some way of knowing or talking to somebody who knows those objects. And so I think in this case, having titles or having materials can sometimes be a way in which people walk towards something and then immediately look to the right of it to see its name or to see its material, rather than spend those few seconds looking at the work instead and trying to decipher like how it might have been made or what it could hint at. And so that's one reason to pay closer attention to the work, but then also for myself, for it to not be as autobiographical as it is, and to keep some of those things to myself, because it is entirely the last 7 years of my life. Yeah.
I have a question related to that, which, as I started getting involved in the project and there's already a sort of decision that we weren't going to have labels, I started talking to other colleagues in the museum, and people were like, well, that's very unusual for us. We always have labels. But I felt really defensive of the decision to not have labels, because it seems like you're saying an opportunity for people to enter the work in a unmediated way. And I'm always really excited about experience in general, but in particular experiences with art that allow you to find your own meaning within it. So my question coming out of that is, based on discussions we've been having with students together, and their kind of excitement that when they realize there's no labels and they're looking around, they're like, what, why, what's happening here? I get to just look at the work and have this experience. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about an interaction you've had with a student in connection with the show, and maybe in particular their experience with it, something they shared with you.
I think I don't know if this is going to come up at all, but I think something that I actually saw happening today was when my sister was looking at the collage well, now it's gone, but it was there in the previous slide. It has a checkered background, and looking at it, and then seeing her looking at it and noticing that her face was also in it. And then if that same person has then also looked at the painting, another painting where she is in reverse, and there's another painting where she's also there. And so I think that I am excited by like kind of mirroring that can happen across a gallery, and sometimes that can be very, obvious, or like there's an eye here and there's an eye there, or there's a diamond, and it becomes too like an easy of a motif to use all over the place. But I have noticed if you do spend time, and I don't often spend a lot of time with artworks in the first place, but if someone's like a better, more careful person and they're looking, I think it can be then very exciting to notice the memory puzzle where you overturn a piece and you see one thing, and then you try and flip another piece and you see the same thing and you try to match it, to then begin to see some things mirroring and then expecting that to happen all over the gallery. And another instance I remember is there's a drawing of a bookshelf, and they're all the books that I looked at or thought about last summer. And there were two students who were looking at it who then noticed the letter that had fallen from behind the bookshelf and is underneath, and then they looked up and then they saw the envelope, which is a cardboard envelope on top of it. And so that is what I wanted, and I think a very direct way to make people see that or think of the connection of the drawing with the paper envelope on top would be to have a title that said it. But it's much nicer if no one sees it and then one person sees it, because it feels as special as when I thought of making it. Yeah.
If I can pick up on something that both of you sort of mentioned. Pallavi had said that the show is sort of basically the last 7 years of your life, and Roz, you in your intro, I thank Pallavi for her vulnerability with the show, and I think there's something that's really intimate about sort of opening up this space, and the sort of combination of the bedroom with the bed, and then also the artist studio and the classroom, which are sort of three distinct but mixed spaces that are all sort of present here. And so I was curious about how you are thinking about sort of navigating the sort of push and pull of sort of incredibly intimate spaces, and also ones that are for teaching and for sort of community, and how the sort of these sort of strands came together and how you were deciding the sort of arrangement and layout. And I know we had many discussions about where the folding screen would go and how that sort of sectioned off space, and sort of those sorts of both conceptual but very material and spatial considerations.
I think I'm, and this is something I'm thinking right now, and I think maybe this has being interested in teaching and one's home and having your work be maybe directly about things that are happening to you and images of that. I think it is related to my interests in schools and also in residencies or artist communities that are like intentional living spaces where faculty and students and residents and staff all live together and work together. And I do get to experience that 3 months out of the year. And I here I experience it in a slightly different way, but we are at a residential college where I see a lot of my students in front of my house as well, or they know who I went on a walk with, or they see some visitor who's, appeared. And so I think it's, and each time we are our whole, and I get to see the same about my students too. I get to see them do different things in the classroom versus what's happening outside, or talk in a more animated way to somebody else than they would maybe in the class. And so it is like whole people who are showing parts of themselves based on their workplace or a professional context, or like how much, like what parts of you have to kind of funnel when you're doing that. And if you want it to be like what happens, who you become in a classroom. I am very interested in teaching artists and how their practice informs their curriculum, and the artist who makes their home, so how their home looks because of what they teach and practice, and so how all of that can be folded into one, because it is this like very fortunate profession where you can take every part of your life and make that and have that be the prism for every other part. So there is no part that needs to be like very clearly delineated at all or separated. And so I think for me at least, I don't see any difference in how I spend all the hours of my day, and I find it impossible to make work about anything that outside of what's happening right then. So much of even teaching feels like an extension of like the things that you're doing in your studio. And if you work at a place like this college, you have the liberty to then shape an entire syllabus over your most recent interests. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that I love so much about what you're saying is there's not so much a need to compartmentalize the different parts of one's life. And as an artist, I think you have no choice, kind of, because you bring your artist self to your teaching, to your life with your family, to any other situations that you find yourself in. And I think that is something that people can learn from artists in general, but especially students here, getting to see how you merge those parts of your life into one. I think people find really, students I've found are very inspired by that. So thank you for kind of modeling what that could look like. And yeah.
Thank you. Another question I have is there are many representations, including here in the embroidery of your family. Some of them are here today. And I think it's a sort of, feels like an anchor point in the exhibition and in your work. And I'm curious about, there's so many sort of interlocutors that you have in this show, even in this one image, from like a cat to your parents to seashells and birds. And so I wanted to, I guess this is a question about how sort of where the work comes from in terms of these sorts of social relationships and material relationships. And if you think about how do you make work for particular interlocutors, and is that a sort of way in which a sort of exchange or reciprocal relationship through which the work emerges?
I do really love to make things for people, but I also really so many of these things will hopefully go to people who are in them, or a friend who I was thinking about. I do want everything I make to be with people who love it and are fond of it. But I think with like the inclusion of my family or my friends in my work, I think it is so much of this work is made in a lot of isolation. So after I teach, I do have hours after that when I'm very quietly in my apartment in Spring Street. So I am by myself a lot. And so in that time, often I think initially when I was a little younger, I would make a lot of images of myself, and they were myself mostly first because I was like a very readily available model for myself, and I can ask myself to do anything, and I can make myself pose as many times as I want, so there's no thank you or apology for any of that, which is nice. And then it always was like some kind of the figures were often just like a framework based on which other things could begin to happen. So something that would fill up like a certain amount of space and make the initial awkwardness of a drawing go away, and then other things could happen that I was interested in. But more recently, I have begun drawing like many other members of my family, because most of my family lives in India. I'm very lucky that my sister lives now in the same state as me half the time, Massachusetts and then New York. And I'm beginning to realize that I'm somehow 35 years old, and I have to make some decisions about my life, and it seemed that I just found myself here, and I found myself continents away from my family, and it was not a conscious decision to be away from them. It was not a conscious decision to like have a particular kind of life. And I really yearn for the way my childhood was and how it felt to spend so much time with my family. And so I do think that by making images of something, maybe I don't at all have a meditation practice, but I think by making images of something, it's possible to come very close to whatever feeling you have for them and really feel that, and then have the after effect of that feeling on your physical self. So by making images of my father or my grandmother, all of my life with them happens to me again, and I feel a lot of love and I feel very happy. And so and then it makes me want to, because I'm so fond of them and because they have made me, and also they're all incredibly creative people. So what I love is that by doing this, I'm actually repeating something that they have done their whole life as much as they could. Many of the women in my family had to at some point cease to, going further with the creative practice. But so I feel on the one hand that I am doing what so many people in my family have always done, so it's a very natural thing to do. But then also, it's impossible to forget, but then also always telling myself and everybody I know that it's not an individual pursuit, and it is just like all these like rivers of work that happen to be happening through me now, and then will go on to somebody else. But yeah, that's how it feels, and that's how it feels to draw my friends as well, that that it's like I'm not pursuing any of this by myself.
I have a related question. I think the title of the essay that I wrote for this book is "Home is Where We Create It," something like that. And as you're speaking about your experience kind of leaving India and being here and having to create a home, I mean, that's something I've always admired about you over the last 10 years that I've known you. And I think that it'd be really nice to hear you talk about what collaboration has allowed you to do to make a home make a space for yourself and for your, work, but also for your life. In particular, I wonder if you would talk about The Bird piece by Darian, and I really love how it shows up in 35th Birthday, and kind of, I guess, would you talk about that piece and your decision to put it in the show, and then maybe expand on that with some description of the collaborations that you've had throughout the exhibition?
Yeah, and I wonder if, is it in the slides at all, that photo? I don't know if it's there. So. But I don't know if you saw it, but it's a painting that's to the left-hand side as you enter, and it's me, and there's my sister, and there's a big bouquet, and there's a baby, and there are many family members inside that painting. And I started it on the 31st of December last year, while I was at MacDowell, which is a very nice residency, but I was very upset when I was there. And Emily, who also lives in Peterborough, knows I would go to her house very often. It was just winter, and it was a dark, and it's a very serious place to do a lot of work, and I think I just wanted to be with people. But I made that painting for myself because the previous fall was the first time that I ever felt that I felt very strongly that if I love my family so much, and if I love how it feels to be a sister and a daughter, that fortunately in the 21st century it's not going to accidentally happen to me, that I will just find myself with another huge large family. And so it felt that I had to do certain things, and I often, painting has been a way for me to start doing something that I don't quite know how to do, and whether it's how to construct a sculpture, or whether it's how to work with stained glass, how to weave, how to grow a garden. All of these things that I have gradually learned were initially paintings, so that I could figure out the mechanics of it while painting it, or figure out who I need to learn from, or who do I need to find to show me. But in that, so I made that painting of some kind of scene that I wanted to be around again, and I was of course making it alone, but in that painting it's me, it's my sister, we're making a bouquet together, and there is my future baby, she's asleep, and she's sleeping with a quilt that has a line from a poem in the New York subway that I read that I really liked. And then my Adam, my brother-in-law, he is reading a book and he's falling asleep, because both my sister and Adam, they are lawyers and they work very long hours, and so sometimes they're sleep deprived. So he's taking a snooze in that. And my mother she is scribbling on a drawing that she has already completed, so she's making her own drawing on top of it. And in front of her, and whose face we cannot see, is some kind of future lover, who may be the father of this child. We don't know yet. And he's there, and he's reading a poem by Bill Knott, who's an incredible poet who died recently, whose work I've read for the first time at MacDowell. And then off to the side, on this side, is my father, and he's reading a newspaper called Desh Bandhu, which means friend of the nation, but it's also the name of a freedom fighter after whom my neighborhood in Delhi was named, Chittaranjan Das. And so there's a college in my neighborhood there called Desh Bandhu College. And so this is a fictional newspaper, and in the newspaper are all the headlines from 15th August 1947, when India became independent, but it is in the Palestinian context of what kind of freedoms are possible for places where it seems just as impossible now that there can ever be a sovereign nation, just like it was impossible for India, and it was a 100-year-long freedom struggle to get there. So he's reading this paper as if that day has already arrived. And then my two grandmothers are flying, and a cat can see them because they're ghosts, so the cat is able to perceive them. And I've totally forgotten your question now, but it has in it, because it's my 31st birthday, it has in it the drawing of, above my head is a drawing of birds that my ex-boyfriend Darian Woods, who's an NPR reporter, you can listen to him every day on Planet Money, he made that for me for my birthday, and I felt it was so lovely because these things can just end and you can never talk to each other, but he's one of my closest friends. And when I came to this country, I knew my great aunt and her 2 kids, and that's it. And now I have all these people who I've met because I went to school, I went to some residency, I went somewhere else, somebody introduced me to somewhere else, and I've had so many loves. And so he made this beautiful painting, and now it's also in the exhibition. This painting.
So it's both in the painting and in the exhibition.
It's in both places. Yeah. It's there twice. And then this painting was in Bombay for a while, and I wasn't sure if it would be in the show. So one of my first students that I ever had in 2019 spring, Young Cho, I commissioned her to make an embroidery of the painting, and she learned how to embroider in my class.
Of 35th birthday.
Of 35th birthday. So there's an embroidery of that painting that she made. And the embroidery I taught her was very basic, like stuff that you would make like a flower with. But she's an incredible artist and baker, but she's a fabulous artist. And so she made this embroidery. And so that's also there. So there are many of any one piece. And while making it and thinking of it, I just reminded me of like how like anonymous I don't feel anymore. And in so many cities, there's somebody I know and someone I love. And it's a very strange thing to have happened in a country that I didn't even think I would be in. Yeah.
Thank you. Nick,
yeah.
Maybe one more.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I love how all of these connections and relationships sort of come together in the show, but the exhibition is also a sort of stage for the possibility of the creation of more and new connections and collaborations. And I know that's also something that you were very interested in sort of early on, making sure that it was, whatever space it was going to be one that could be activated and used and one for creative making. And so I wonder if you can sort of reflect on sort of for the month-ish that it's been open, how those sorts of collaborations have been going, from student making to the Urban Bushwomen residency, and what sort of, I don't know, possibilities might emerge from those.
I think that, I know that a lot of spaces like aspire to have something more than what's already happen there, and maybe it's, like, to use even the word activate, it's like it's there. It's a museum. There's already work. But I think the reason I wanted other people to come and be there is maybe it's not for being like self-conscious about one's work taking up so much room, but also like a good use of space. So if there is a table, let it not just be like a gesture at a table, but something that you can use as a table. I really don't like when people say things like something as something, garden as art, or some film as something, or just a cooking as some art. Because I think it's that something as something is almost pretending like it's just not possible for that very thing to be as lovely, or that it must be put into a museum to do that. So we are at this college, there are enough students here, there are people who may want a different place to work, or a different kind of table, a pretty big table. You can all use it if you want to during museum hours. You just have to sign up. Maybe that's an obstacle. But some students do use it like on a weekly basis to do their projects. Others use it to do meetings. We've had some of our meetings there. The Urban Bushwomen, like an incredible performance dance group, came and also did a residency and interacted, or had it be like the kind of some points of like departure and then also background for their own performance. And so that gallery is never going to be my apartment, but I wanted to feel occasionally as close as being like a slightly more like casual space, rather than a place where you have to be very respectful to what's happening, or a very serious, like a serious place. But I think it can definitely be used more. So if you're here and you live in Williamstown, this is your invitation to be there till 5 p.m. only.
Only until 5 p.m. Okay, well, that was really, really very nice to hear you chat more about this. And I think we should open it up to questions from the audience. Lisa, Doran, here, one of us are going to give you, not that one, one of us are going to give you our microphone. Here you go. And can you please speak into the mic with your question? Who has a question? Spencer.
Hi. Thanks for this show. It's a really great experience. I feel like when I'm in there, I sincerely could believe you sleeping in there and working in there. Like, it is very much a version of your apartment. And one of the kind of impressions I get is that it's this kind of observatory from which you're observing and creating and distilling things. And in the other room is this prolific collection of videos. And I was hoping you could talk about the two. And I feel like one thing I observe is that the videos feel like you're turning the lens on yourself. And if you could talk about how that relates to this other room and this other sort of practice that you have.
I started making those videos entirely on Instagram. And so they have followed the trajectory of Instagram's like technological improvements as well. So the first ones were all like 15 seconds long. And I used only the Instagram internal editing software to make it. And then it became longer, became a minute. And they were all, so when I was in Richmond studying at VCU, I had geotagged my house as Attraction Foundation. And then I took it off and I realized that you can actually go to my house if you do something like that. But then I use it as just like an archive for videos, and I started making them because I was 25 years old, and I really wanted to fall in love, but I also wanted someone to love me for a lot of things that maybe you cannot know about a person when you first meet them. So maybe they cannot know that I really love to sing, or things that I feel very shy about anyone knowing about me until maybe a decade has gone by. So, but I wanted them to like love me for all these things that I held very dear. And so I started making videos of just what I did by myself. And it was very different from like performing in front of people, because those things, it would be impossible to perform because that was the barrier there. And so by having it be on this like public platform, anyone could see it, so they could know that it's about me, so that when they met me, like you're introduced by your name, they could be all these videos behind me, or I could be seen through them. So it could be a part of me that is known without me actively doing that in front of them. So I think that's when I started making those videos. And then I kept making them when I didn't have a studio, because I also felt very strongly that because of how much I love making things, it cannot be dependent on whether someone else likes my work enough for it to be in a gallery, or whether I have a studio, or it cannot be through another person that this happens. So it felt like a way for like the studio that goes everywhere with you and then is revealed through video. And then after, I think about 2018, or like I made a few more in the last few years, but I've almost entirely stopped making them, because it's just like the container for it, Instagram, is now such a different place. I started using it in 2011, and now there are all these ads about like glass skin masks and things that I'm not interested in, and just like a lot of ads. And so it feels, and also it's like a very powerful tool for alternative like media reporting. So it just feels like pretty jarring then to suddenly have this like video that is about someone you're in love with or something. It just seems like it's not the point anymore for this particular thing. So that's how it's come to an end. And I think also I'm not as maybe obsessively thinking about love the way I used to when I was younger, and now I'm more interested in shells or bookshelves or the moon phase or my family. And so I think my interests have shifted, and I think that's where maybe the drawings have moved to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
I was very struck by the painting of the books, and one of the things with artists is they're always being asked, like, which artists influenced you, and I was curious, were you meant to look at the book titles and the artists in the book as who influenced you, or is it more just the object of what you were looking at when you made the work?
Yeah, I think I have become even more interested in books since they are our backgrounds from virtual meetings, and they hint at so much, or books as it's also what's happened to potted plants also. They become indicators of what your style is, right? The shape of the leaf, if you like those round ones that are spraying outwards, and or pothos in 2014, And so I think those books, I know what it feels like to be in the company of books, to suggest the kinds of things you're interested in, or to suggest knowledge. But those were actually all books that I looked at this summer, and were things that artists that I was learning about or reading about, and also poets. I love the poet Kenneth Coke very much, and I started reading some of his plays, so his book is in there. I really love Middlemarch, which I have now been reading for almost a year on and off, and so the Middlemarch is also there. And so books that I'm seriously reading, but also books that I've just glanced at or looked at images of, and Diego Rivera's murals, the outer space abacus, because I was thinking of making an abacus and learning how to make one. So it is like a bibliography for the whole show, but then also just the promise of being able to learn much more, whether or not you do it. Maybe I know you read everything, but I think I just cannot believe with the amount of time most of us spend online. I doubt everyone's read every book that they have, and but they are very attractive objects, and they have so much promise for. And I think even wanting to know something about something is quite nice, even if you don't ever end up learning or reading that book. But I have looked at all of them. Yeah.
I just have a question about your process, because it looks like a lot of the pictures, have some similar motifs and styles and whatnot. I just sort of picturing your studio, which I've never seen before, but I just imagine it is you've got a lot of things going on, and you're working on a number of pieces at once. Do you go back and forth? Am I correct in sort of interpreting?
Yeah, so so most of the work that the half of the work is from this year, and half of the work is from the last 7 years. So I definitely did not make all of this year, and then there are three to four things that are made by my friends. My studio itself is heavily underutilized, because I usually work on my dining table, and then the work goes in there, and then I look at it. But I work inside my house as much as I can, and I do work on several things at once, mostly because of either really feeling disgusted by something and then having to put it away. But I think so. I used to work very on small detailed things over long periods of time, and then maybe these feelings of extreme feelings would happen more often, of disgust and so on. But now recently I've begun working a lot quicker, and so working with children's materials of crayons or colored pencils, and these things are a lot faster, and the drawings take maybe 2 or 3 days, and then I only do that when I'm doing that, and I work on it for as long as I can, and then I go to sleep, and then I wake up and do it again. And I think having it in my house means that everything else can happen around the drawing rather than leaving the house and then the work stops because you have to eat it. It could just happen at the same time. So I think that pace has now changed a lot, and it's quicker all at once and more focused than it could be before.
Thank you, Lisa. So as a VSA here at the museum, I have the privilege of spending a lot of time with your work, just monitoring the galleries and really just taking time to absorb. And notably with your video work, it reminded me of, y'all might remember the video sharing app Vine back in the day, where small little snippets, that was the first thing that came to mind when I saw that. And you mentioned that using Instagram as a platform, it sort of changed over time, especially with algorithms and ads and just the modern moment we're in. But one thing that strikes me about the show is a sense of vulnerability. And I think one of the most vulnerable things we can do is invite people into our living space and see our which way our furniture faces, or see the different works that are on our walls. And I'm curious for your process. And one last thought too. You mentioned coming to the United States and moving from family was not a conscious decision. It just sort of happened through the process of time and events. Would you say that your process as an artist and in the show, if vulnerability was part of that in sort of opening yourself to a wider audience, would you say that that was a conscious decision or just something that happened over the course of these 7 years as you made this art?
Well, I think maybe instead of vulnerability, I think it's more like embarrassment. I think that's what it is. I feel mortified with that sound going, but it is. I did do it, and it is me. But it is very embarrassing also. But yesterday, my sister and I were talking about American attitudes towards one's home and like how Indians feel about our home. And, for me, like even if you, for example, if you decided to go to Bombay and you emailed me and you said you would like to stay with my parents, that would totally be an option for you now that we have seen each other's face, And so all manner of people have stayed at our home without, maybe we were meeting them or my parents met them somewhere once and they come over, and people come over all the time and people go to people's homes all the time, and the home is actually not considered like such a private space or one that it has to be is only for the closest friends or like the closest family. It's for just about anybody. And in fact, it would be a little like insulting if like somebody came from far away and they didn't stay at your house, Though it's fine that you are not staying at my house, that's just fine. It would be why would they not stay with us? Even if there are no beds for them, even if there's no space for all these people, it's like, why did they not come stay with us? And so I really, I think that's at least the context in which I grew up. And I don't think I am exactly like that. I mean, I don't feel like, oh, just come over. Like, I don't think I am that, but I understand that way of living and being. And I think that I do share, I'm not a private person at all. And who do I hold things back from? Maybe my students, I don't tell them everything because it's not appropriate to do that. But if they were to ask, I would tell them whatever they want to know. And so I think that the drawings and the paintings, I think maybe they're a little restrained even in how much I want to share or would be willingly tell you. And yeah, I find all of this very easy to do. I think what's harder to do is spend time with people. I think that is the truly giving yourself is spending your time with them. And I think sharing something or what happened to me or what something looked like or who I love, these are just, I'll be dead and it's irrelevant, like what I did. That doesn't matter. But I think in my own time, I think whether I can give a part of my day, I think that's much more meaningful and vulnerable and requires me to be present in a way that maybe storytelling does not. But thank you for that, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. So is there a story behind the textiles that are so lovely on the bed?
The quilt that's on the bed. So the first textile is Young's embroidery of my painting. And then underneath is the quilt. And the quilt it's 7 yards of linen that I wove at the Marshfield School of Weaving in Vermont. And that's where I have on and off. One of the first times I learned how to weave was also with Emily, who is sitting right there, which is how we met at a residency while weaving and working together. And then 2 years ago, I was in Vermont, and I was by myself weaving, and that's all I did for 2 weeks. And so I ended up with these 7 yards that I then I cut to then make a quilt. And then once you learn how to weave, or even if you are like interested in textile, it changes your ability to cut fabric or to quilt. And it's impossible, because if I make a diagonal cut that was 2.5 hours of weaving, that is gone. Or it's not gone, it's become a much smaller triangle and not at all the 40 inches of weaving. So it's a whole cloth quilt, and then it has, oh, there it is. It has on top of it a holiday candelabra is what I called it. And those are just made out of triangles that I pieced together while I was very feverish and sick in Finland. And then I ran behind the UPS truck to like try and ship it off here for some show, but that's that. And then there's a chessboard, which is made out of fabric. That was for a collaboration I did with my friend Esther Stewart, who I met 7 years ago at another residency where Frank was dean. So that's another way that I meet people. And that chessboard was made for, I think it was a show about Bauhaus and about things that colors or artists that are excited about it or interested in it. And so we made a shelf of objects, and I made the chessboard as part of it, as something that a child's classroom could have, which you could fold away and put away. That's that piece.
There are many things left unsaid from this conversation. So many questions that could be asked, so many stories that you could tell. So I encourage all of you to find Pallavi in one way or another, whether it's through her website or through an in-person conversation quickly after this, and just ask more questions. And thank you all for being here, and thank you both for your openness and willing to participate in this program. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.